Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, people on Zoom.
Hello, people on Zoom.
They can all hear me,
Yeah.
yeah? Okay, I'm just looking at them. Okay.
Thanks for bearing with us through this heat. I know it's a little stuffy in here. If you need water or anything, there's a water fountain and cups. For those of you who don't know, Venerable Robina Courtin has worked full-time for Lama Thubten Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's organization, the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, since her ordination in the late 1970s. Over the years, she has served as editorial director of Wisdom Publications, editor of Mandala Magazine, executive director of Liberation Prison Project, and as a touring teacher of Buddhism. Her life and work with prisoners has been featured in the documentary films Chasing Buddha and Key to Freedom. Venerable Robina is known for her straightforward and energetic teaching style, helping people discover the potential of their own minds with clear explanations about Tibetan Buddhism and how to apply it to their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's hope we can do that. So let's just state our motivation, as the lamas would say. We might say, what's our purpose? I think it's a good way to put it. What's our goal? Why are we here together, you know? Well, it's to listen, and that includes me, I promise, to these views about the world, basically, views about the human mind, views about our potential. And they're coming from the Buddha through the Tibetan tradition, tracking it back through all these knowledge holders, rigzin, lovely word in Tibetan, knowledge holders, tracking this knowledge back in this unbroken chain right back to the Buddha himself, which is encouraging. So it's the essence of Buddha's teachings really is about the mind, the human mind, its marvelous, marvelous potential. And this is where straight away we hear, you know, the Buddha's view, the potential we've got this to be perfected in all the goodness and rid of all the rubbish, rid of all neuroses, rid of all ego. Straight away, it's radically different from our usual view of the neuroscientific views. It's not being critical, it's just being evident. It's evident, you know. Your neuroscientist does not tell you that your mind isn't pure in its nature. Your psychiatrist doesn't tell you that your mind is pure in its nature either, because we tend to give equal status, don't we, to the okay, you can hear me all? Zoomers? Just checking, you can hear me? Okay. So because in our culture, in our neuroscientific views, in our psychological views, because we take the brain to be the Buddha, the mind, then of course we take it that as what it is. And indeed we can see evidence of anger and neuroses and this kind of thing. But the Buddha's view is radically different. It was always important to point this out, I think, you know. Buddha could be wrong. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama tells us, especially us modern people, you know, you listen to what the Buddha says, and then if you decide to take upon yourself his methodology, you go step by step. Well, basically, you're ticking the boxes as you go, aren't you? And if you get to some point where you prove from your own direct experience that actually what the Buddha says is not true, then of course you must reject him. This is something really important to remember, not just blindly swallowing something whole and liking it or believing in it. That won't do you much good, you know. So the Buddha's saying we've got, in the simple view, we've got the simple way of presenting the Buddhist psychological model from the point of view of the contents of our mind. You can divide all the contents of our thoughts and feelings and emotions very simply into three categories. You know, it's not complicated. The neurotic, I-based, fear-based, limiting, constricted, unhappy, delusional, ridiculous states of mind. We all know them. Attachment, depression, jealousy, blah, blah, blah. We know these. Anxiety, so on. And then you've got the good stuff, our saving grace, love and kindness, compassion, and so forth. The third lot, we won't discuss those much tonight. They are like, I call these the mechanical parts of our mind, the parts that anybody, whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need them. You need good concentration. You need good memory. You need good discrimination. They're neither virtues nor non-virtues, these first two categories, according to this model. They're crucial, but that's not our discussion tonight. So our discussion is the second category, the good qualities, you know, the good qualities. In particular, you could frame really all the Buddha's teachings in terms of wisdom and compassion. A bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion, you know. So the wisdom wing is mainly the job of knowing your own mind very well and unpacking and unraveling its contents in order to begin to subdue the crazy parts, because they're the ones that cause you suffering and cause you to harm others. So the consequence of this is you become more content and fulfilled. Then you continue the work on the compassion wing, the bodhisattva path, where you work on your mind. That never stops, but now it's in reference to how to break down the barriers between self and other, to cultivate more of this love, compassion, and the rest, So it can all be summarized really in the word compassion, which is very simply defined as starting with being a thought, a concept. You see suffering and you think, may you not suffer. So that can grow to limitless degrees on this bodhisattva path, So we know that word and we like it. If someone has compassion for you, you don't feel they're horrible. If you have compassion, you think it's a nice quality. But like in all these states of mind, it's really crucial if you want to follow the Buddha's view or even understand it, you need to know what his definitions are, because they're not the way we talk, So this compassion, Buddha talks about it at 3 levels. If compassion is may you not suffer, when you say suffering, you have empathy, and broadly in Buddhist psychology, as opposed to, I think I've heard in modern psychology, people distinguish between empathy and compassion. In Buddhist terms, in general, they're same. They're connected. You're connected to others. You see their suffering, and your heart reaches out, and you wish they didn't suffer. Then you can get to the next level, really kind of the really powerful level of the bodhisattva path, which they actually call great compassion, mahakaruna. It's a technical term. Not only you go, oh my God, look at that suffering, you go, what can I do to fix it? That's the brave attitude of the bodhisattvas. That's the courageous compassion of the bodhisattva. They take this responsibility, So like in the 4 immeasurable thoughts, there's one longer version where you say, I will, may sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. I will make this happen. I will make this happen, this brave attitude. But the piece that's crucial to understand, and this is where it differs very much from our views that we tend to take for granted, is the view of what is suffering. So if compassion is empathy for someone suffering, we better be on the same page with Buddha in terms of his definition of suffering. And this is where it's radically different. So here we're going to go back to the wisdom wing and the 4 noble truths, Lord Buddha's first teaching, which is framed in terms of suffering. The first one is there is suffering, and he's got 3 levels. The obvious one, the first one, the one we all agree with, is really that he calls it the suffering of suffering, which is when the bad things happen, speaking very simply. And that's the compassion, that's the suffering we understand. Someone's sick, someone's old, someone's dying, someone's, been cheated on or raped or murdered or poor or whatever, the war zone going on. They're the people we have compassion for. The animals who get hurt, the babies who get hurt. Nothing wrong with that, that's just the first level. There are 2 other levels, each one more subtle than the first. And this is where it's, again, radically different. The second one is called the suffering of change. The third one is called all-pervasive suffering or conditioned suffering. And for our perspective, it's quite abstract concept because it's from the point of view of the big picture in Buddhism that states that each mind has countless lifetimes going back and back and back and continuing on and on and on. And this whole broader view of what Buddha would refer to as all the different realms of existence within samsara that we can, go from. To this one, to that one. Some are more happy, some are more suffering. From the bigger perspective of being in samsara, if you are in samsara, then you're caught up in having these deluded states of mind that cause you to do actions that harm others, that cause you to be born in suffering realms. And even if you stop the grosser level of suffering, the subtler level of suffering is the more enjoyable realms of existence, such as the human, or even the more subtle for us, which is called the God realms, which is a bit like the Muslims and the Christians refer to as heaven. Buddha has a similar view. And these are very, very delicious, very, very happy. But for the Buddha, they're still in samsara because you haven't cut the root of all suffering, which is this primordial misconception deep in the bones of our being that clings to an intrinsic, real, solid, separate me. This is where it gets more subtle, you know. So being free of that by realizing emptiness, by having the wisdom that knows there's no such I as that, that's what cuts all samsara. And that's when you quit samsara and you stop being reborn altogether. And then if you're on the bodhisattva path, you can choose to be reborn out of compassion for others. So the subtle level of suffering is quite abstract for us. The second kind of suffering is more understandable, but it's a bit more depressing. It's a bit depressing. The first kind of suffering is easy to understand. You know yourself, when the bad things happen, what's that? When you hurt your knee, when your hubby's mean to you. Small levels, you know, when things go wrong, you know, all to the most intense level of things going wrong. That we understand, that's called suffering. We know that, and we know we do not want it. So if we reach out to, we sort of look outside, in the first level of practice, you learn to become super familiar with your own suffering and its causes, and you try to give that up for your own self. In a sense, is what we call in the West, that's self-compassion. That's compassion for yourself. They don't use that term in Buddhism, but we understand that. You get to know your own suffering and its causes, which the Buddha would say are in here, your delusions and your neuroses and karma. Then on the basis of you knowing about your suffering and its causes and wanting to be free of it, you then open your eyes and go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. And that's the real basis of having any compassion at all for others, because you identify, you can see it, you recognize it, you know. So that's the first kind of suffering, which is pretty intense already, but that's a very limited group, isn't it? If we look at the 7, even just the humans, forget the animals, the 7 billion humans, probably a lot of them, maybe a majority, have the suffering of suffering, relatively speaking. But the Buddha is saying we're all suffering, we're all in the same boat, we're all in samsara, and we've got the 3 levels of suffering. So let's look at the second kind, which is quite hard to understand. And as when we understand this from our own point of view, then we're going to expand our compassion to include all these other people who we, on the face of it, don't think are suffering. So who are they? Well, they're the happy people. So the first kind of suffering is when the bad things happen. For the Buddha, the second kind of suffering is when the good things happen. So what we think of as happiness, he calls it a more subtle level of suffering, which is a bit depressing. Kind of like you're not even allowed to have a cup of tea and be happy, you know, you've got to kind of be miserable. We really misunderstand it. And it's quite crucial to understand this one, which is not exactly the topic of tonight, but I think I want to go into it. Maybe we did it last time, can't remember. We did, oh, okay then. Good, I'm glad you remembered. So, okay, on the basis of that one, and to remind us if we weren't there or if we forget, the second kind of suffering is suffering because it's driven by attachment. The happiness we get right now for the Buddha is driven by attachment, this bottomless pit of emotional hunger that craves nice feelings. And the only way we know how to get nice feelings, happiness, another word for happiness, is to get an object of the senses, speaking very simply. So the Buddha says when we do the analysis, using his view, we're going to recognize it's a more subtle, more nuanced level of suffering. It kind of tricks you, because on the face of it, it seems like happiness. So when we understand that and really understand our own attachment and really understand how that is the cause of our own suffering at this subtler level, then we can afford to have compassion for all the other people caught up in this attachment. Okay, so why courageous compassion? Because once we understand the first kind, and we understand for ourselves, Buddha's view of the causes of why bad things happen is because we are our own creators, as we've discussed. The Buddha's view is there's no such concept as an external creator. Buddha's one of these, that's where he diverged, mainly one of his ways he diverged from the previous Indians. You know, there's no fundamental source, no concept like that, not for the Buddha. That we are all our own source. Our consciousness going back and back and back is the source of who I am now. It's not a very complicated concept, but we make it complicated, you know. So any moment of happiness or suffering that we experience, the main cause for the Buddha is one, our own past actions, and two, the virtue or the delusion that drove those actions. If it was a virtuous thought and a virtuous action, then it will ripen as my happiness. If it's a non-virtuous thought, a negative thought and a negative action, it will ripen as my suffering. It's actually incredibly simple, but we make it complicated because we hear it in terms of punishment and reward. But for the Buddha, there's no such thing as a punisher or a rewarder. We are all our own creator, like His Holiness calls karma self-creation. That takes us time to really think through. It's very instinctive to hear ourselves as being kind of produced by circumstances and other people, not to mention a creator, and somehow we're this victim that gets bad things and good things happened to us, you know? Not like that. Each of us is experiencing the fruits of our own past. We are our own creators. So the more we get that in the very first level of practice, then we can start to look at the rest of sentient beings. And then what happens is you are now going to be capable of having compassion for the murderer and the rapist and the pedophile and the torturer and the mean ex-husband. Whereas normally we only have compassion for the victims, don't we? But from this Buddhist perspective, doing the work in the earlier stages of practice based on the Four Noble Truths, what that does bring you is this recognition that you are your own creator, that your own suffering as a result of your own actions and your own happiness as a result of your own actions. It really brings accountability and responsibility, and it increases your empathy 1,000,000 times for other people. Oh my God, we are all in the same boat. And this is why they say that the bodhisattvas have the greatest compassion for us. Not even because we haven't realized emptiness, but we haven't realized cause and effect. Because the view of I is the view of an innocent victim who didn't ask to get born and who got made by somebody else. We all have that view. It's deep in our bones when there's an assumption that somehow things come from out there. Good things happen, don't know why, and we don't care why, just give me more. And bad things happen, and how dare they? This is how we all feel, we know that. So when we start to put karma together and take responsibility for our own happiness and suffering, then we can start to really have compassion for the rest of the world, who are the harmers, the naughty ones. There's no space for compassion for bad people in our usual view. Our view of compassion now is mixed perfectly with anger. I know when I was a radical lefty, a radical political activist, nothing wrong. I was trying to help the world become a better place, you know. But the whole view is based upon this dichotomy, the innocent victims and the wicked oppressors, isn't it? And the more the suffering, the worse the oppressor, the worse the naughty person. And so we have compassion for the victim, and then the next millisecond we say who caused it, and then our anger comes. So our compassion and anger are so mixed because we assume the people we're having compassion for are innocent victims, so how dare this and he and they do that, you know? So to get beyond compassion being mixed with anger, this is what happens when you have the view of karma, and it takes time. We're all in the same boat. And you have, they say the bodhisattvas have even more compassion for the harmer than the harmed. Why? Because the harmed is just finishing the karma they created, and the harmer is just beginning lifetimes of nightmare. This is a heavy duty for us, you know. I mean, even on an ordinary level, forget past lives and future lives, it's possible. A friend of mine, Andre, who works with people in prison in North Carolina, and he works with, you know, young kids in prison, right? And his son was stabbed to death in a bar. It was on the television, the television news. How do you feel about the murderer of your child? Andre, who happens to be a Buddhist, he was in tears. He said, how can I not have compassion for him? His suffering is only just beginning. Now that's exactly the view here, except we're talking future lives as well, you know. So we can see it's possible. He could see immediately, because he works with these kids in prison, so he could see very quickly everybody he's working with in prison, he has compassion for them. They're the ones who are meant to be the bad people. So it's like it's a very powerful view to have compassion for the harmers, and that takes a lot of inner work. You can't just rush there. In the Buddhist perspective, you've got to go through the process of understanding karma first for yourself. Courageous compassion indeed, you know. And it's rooted, this idea of compassion in Buddhism is completely got its source in the view of karma. This is the Buddhist analysis, that's all. I mean, you don't have to like it. But the understanding of how it's possible to have compassion for every living being, the rich ones, the poor ones, the happy ones, the unhappy ones, the crazies, the monsters, the victims. From the Buddhist perspective, it's rooted in karma. Okay, if you're a Christian or a Muslim and you have devotion in God, it's possible. It's possible. Because everybody is made by God. It's possible. But here, that's not the Buddhist view. So let's look then, even just the compassion we have now, and how it's mixed with anger. It seems to bring anger, and how we seem to assume this is right, you know. So, but actually, so then this again, that's rooted in understanding this basic Buddhist view that we've got these neurotic, deluded, I-based, limiting, unhappy states of mind, and then the positive, virtuous, reasonable states of mind, and they are totally different. Totally different states of mind. They've got a totally different character. The unhappy negative ones are all the voices of ego, if you like, this root delusion, this ego grasping, this primordial clinging, assumption of an I, a separate I. It's quite subtle, that. So attachment and anger and the rest are all voices of that one. And they're all in their nature limiting, they're fear-based, they're neurotic feeling, they're absolutely not pleasant, they're small, and they distort. They're called delusions, which is a great word in English. When you're driven by attachment, everything appears to you through the lenses of your attachment that causes the objects to appear more delicious than they really are. If you're driven by aversion or anger, then you're seeing everything through the lenses of aversion, which exaggerate the bad qualities of something. We run between these two 1,000 times a day. So the thing was interesting. So one point I want to talk about, first of all, that attachment's linked to anger for us, because we assume a person, even the only person we are prepared to have compassion for, this is interesting. I think the only person we're prepared to have compassion for, they have to be innocent. Think about that. Like if you see someone punch me and I punch them right back, or if you see someone punch me, but you didn't see that I punched them first, and then you feel sorry for me, and then later you discover that I'd punched them first, you'll go, oh, well, she deserves it. What do you mean have compassion for her? So we have to have an innocent victim to have compassion, I'd say. This is shocking when you think about it, because the Buddha says we've been punching each other since the beginning of time. You know, it's just one life after another, meeting each other, kissing and then being kissed, and killing and then being killed. So we're all in the same boat. So that's a very big, different view. To try and cultivate that's not easy. So even Andre's example, without even talking about other lives, is also a really good example without talking about other lives. This is a really understandable point, which Andre could get. When we really start to know our own minds, recognize the attachment, recognize the fears, recognize the anger, recognize the depression, and so on, and learn to see that that's the source of the pain you are experiencing, then what you've just done is identify why you suffer. So then the aim is not to be then guilty, but to see that it's causing you suffering and to be sick of that suffering and want to get rid of it, which is what we would call compassion for yourself. So when you can see that your anger and your depression and your jealousy harm you, then you have a basis for having compassion for the harmers, like Andre could. That's pretty intense. But you will never have compassion for the harmers who are you won't even have compassion for your sister who's angry, because until you know that anger is what causes your harm, that jealousy is what causes your harm. We all act like we're innocent victims. We always point fingers and talk about how bad our sister is and how angry she gets, as if we've never had a thought of anger ever. We're all like that, isn't it? We're all like that. So we have to get in touch with our own mind and with the humility and self-confidence, recognize the attachment, the fears, the depression, and recognize not with guilt, which is where we run to, that's revolting, but have kindness towards ourselves that this is why I'm suffering. So this gets me then to learn to distinguish between the delusions and compassion. So let's just now use the example of somebody else. Let's say somebody, it's a different discussion now. First of all, point is to get to know your own delusions and know that's why you're suffering. Then you can have compassion for the angry one, the jealous one, the depressed one, because they're harming themselves. Which also brings the point that when we have compassion, we tend to think, well, the poor thing can't help it, and you pat them on the head and they get away with it. No, not like that. Not like that. Now, there's other level of compassion. There's other approach to understanding compassion is to see, we tend to assume if you see someone suffering, like an ordinary suffering, or having a headache, or, you know, whatever, being an alcoholic, being sick. So what happens is your compassion does reach out. You are empathetic. You do feel their pain. But then we assume that's why we get depressed. That's why we freak out. No, it's not. It's not. That's not the reason at all. Compassion, this is the part that's not how we think. Compassion, by definition, is a virtuous state of mind. Therefore, it is not rooted in ego at all. So if you see suffering and you have compassion, which is amazing, but then you get stressed by it or depressed about it, you assume it's the compassion, we assume it's the suffering out there that causes me to be depressed or anxious or angry. No, it's not. Suffering is somebody else's. The response of compassion is a virtue. You can't possibly suffer because of compassion. So why do you get depressed? Why do you get anxious? Why do you feel like it's causing you to suffer? Because of the attachment. See, attachment is the bottom line. Attachment of these deluded states of mind, it's the one that runs the show. It's this primordial, bottomless pit of emotional hunger that desperately only wants nice things. It only wants nice feelings, and when it looks outside, it only wants to see nice things, wants to see everything to be happy and lovely. So of course you're walking along life with your compassion. You've got, with your attachment, you've got compassion right next to it. You've got compassion, that's your saving grace. But we don't recognize it's polluted by that attachment, that emotional hunger. So that's the part that gets you upset. Compassion can't make you upset. Not possible. Compassion is expansive and connected to others. What can I do to help? That's virtue. What drags you down is not the suffering and is not the compassion. It's your attachment that can't stand problems. And then it's your aversion or your anger. Like when I was on a radical lefty, I had incredible compassion for the first group. First of all, it was for poor people. So I got mad at all the rich capitalists. Then I had compassion for black people, so I got mad at all the white people. Then I had compassion for female people and got mad at the male people. And I am not joking, but I had run out of people to blame. I'm really not kidding. I was very logical going through this system of who to blame for the suffering of the planet. By the time I got to men, there was no one left. Do you see my point? Do you see my point? Okay. Then I met these lamas and they said, you should look at your mind, Robina. I'd never heard of that before. It was a brand new idea. Anyway, the point is here, so when I was a radical lefty or a radical feminist or whatever I was, I'd have compassion for that group and then get equally angry with the oppressor. And it felt very cathartic, you know. That was the analysis I had. So I did have compassion, but I dragged it down with the anger, you know. The anger destroyed it, really. I always remember, he said Martin Luther King, I love it. He says, Martin Luther King said, it's good to be angry, meaning it's good to find fault. Look at the suffering, look at the injustice, look at the racism, look at the poverty, and then you say, what can I do to help? That's compassion. That's compassion, you know, if it becomes that. Not to destroy, but to help. But what I'm getting at is, the attachment in us that needs everything to be lovely, and it's a junkie inside us, deeply instinctive. It can't stand problems, basically. So when you see lots of people suffering, lots of sickness and war zones or environmental disasters, you're going to get incredibly upset, not because of compassion, but because of attachment. And that turns into aversion or anger or despair or anxiety or depression. They are why we suffer. They are why we suffer. This is a revelation when we can see it. Because compassion isn't suffering. Because if we're crying for somebody, we assume I'm suffering because of that. No, it's a very different feeling. Compassion is a very pure a pure attitude. But because we don't make this clear distinction, I think, in our psychological models between so-called negative, neurotic, I-based, fear-based states of mind and valid, appropriate, virtuous ones, it's quite unique to the Buddha. And that demands a lot of inner awareness to really distinguish between them. Then we can understand when you get to the level of bodhisattvas. You know, a person who's given up ego grasping, let's say realized emptiness as well, therefore given up attachment, aversion, jealousy, depression, not a fraction left. You have to posit that as possible. If you can imagine a person like that, then what have they got left? Only love, only wisdom, only compassion, therefore not possible to suffer. This is powerful when we can understand it, but it doesn't fit with our view. You know, I have to really analyze this carefully. That's why we love to hear about the Dalai Lama. I mean, he tries to act like a regular person and say he gets angry and everything. He tries to convince us, but it's not very possible. It's joking. You know he's joking, you know. He can't look like he's angry. He tries to act like a normal person, like he gets angry. It's clear he's not. He's 88 years old. He's a happy, perky fellow, you know. I mean, please hear my point. Why? It's not, oh, that's just the Dalai Lama. No, he's the proof of the pudding. Did you say that in America? Good, okay. He's the proof of the pudding. He's the proof that you can get rid of delusions and have only virtues left. Now, this is mental illness for the materialist model of the mind, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic. If you take neuroscientific views, then it's demented to think that you can rid yourself utterly of all anger, jealousy, and anxiety. It's like cutting out half your brain. We tried that in the 1930s and we turned people into vegetables. That's why it's so different, the view. You've got to really analyze it carefully. So delusions are why we suffer. And then they pollute our compassion and our ability to be of benefit to others. Yeah. So courageous compassion is a really good term. This attitude of the bodhisattvas, to never give up. But it's a tough one. You've got to go one step at a time. We've got to know our own capability. We can't just leap into these ideas. So if you're in a relationship with you're in a victim relationship with somebody, and you're stuck there and they're bullying you, it's not your job to have compassion for them. It's your job to have compassion for yourself and leave the mother. You've got to know where you're at in terms of your practice. Compassion wing is more advanced. This is like more advanced level of practice. It's surprising to us because we often think of compassion as an entry level into a spiritual path. For Buddhism, it's much more advanced because you've got to have compassion for yourself first and know your own mind first and understand karma first. This is the basis of our ability to have genuine compassion for all other sentient beings. So one step at a time. Any questions? What time is it? I'm losing track. What's the clock? You have to tell me the time every now and again. What is it? 7:08. Oh, we're fine. Good. Okay. Questions. Come on. Now it's question time, people. Questions online. You people, you Zoomers. Questions, please, darlings. Anybody got a question? Any old question to start the ball rolling. It always helps. Go, go, go. Yes, talk to me. No, it's a good point, a very good point, a very good point. So first of all, let's just say you've got the view of karma and you know that your suffering is caused by your past. Then you look at Fred over there, your alcoholic brother, let's say, and you go, oh my God, look at the mess he is, his delusions, his alcoholism, he vomits in the soup, he makes life difficult for mum. And you see, and you want to be mad at him because he's making a mess of his life. But then you're able to have compassion because you realize, apart from the people he's harming, by just doing what he's doing, he's harming himself. Because the Buddhist view is everything you think and do and say produces you. So first you recognize you have compassion, but then as to how to help, that's a really interesting point. Well, let's say your brother does not want to know about you helping him. He's not ready for your advice. So you've got to keep your mouth shut, love him for who he is, and then one day he might be open to your advice. So this is the part that's difficult, and this is where compassion comes in, especially if it's your alcoholic brother. Your own attachment wants it all to be nice, so that pollutes your compassion, and you barge in and bully him and make him go to AA, and then he falls off the wagon again, and then you get upset with him. So really we need wisdom. As Dalai Lama often says, compassion is not enough. We need wisdom to know how to help. But the first one is compassion. You see he's harming himself. And if it is something you can do and you're confident, then please do it. You get my point here? Bit louder, darling. Well, at least if you don't know, I mean, like, you know, if you don't really know if you cannot see a solution. And I mean, let's face it, your alcoholic brother's one example, but look at the war zones, look at the poverty, look at animals being harmed, look at the environment. Honey child, if you can go to Ukraine tomorrow, please go. But you know, if you did, it wouldn't help much. So that's when we get really upset. You know, we can't cope. That's where, from the bodhisattva's perspective, you do what you can, help that one ant, that one alcoholic brother. But for the rest of the world, you see, oh my God, look at the suffering. I can't do much, so I'll just continue to do what I can and keep working on myself. And that's where the bodhicitta comes in, so I can become a Buddha one day, then I'll be capable of helping everybody. So it's a very fierce attitude of never giving up and not being overwhelmed by the suffering. Do you see my point? Makes sense? Good. So it's a very strategic approach, not emotional at all, you know? Yeah, yes, yes.
I know that in Buddhism we don't talk much about self-compassion itself, so would you consider that kind of under the wisdom way?
Absolutely, 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 darling. Yeah, that's. I use that term purposely because we understand it. But the way we understand self-compassion is, you know, going home, having a little weep, and having having a massage. Nothing wrong with that. Go for it, have it, please. But that's not the point here. Do that as well. But self-compassion in the Buddhist perspective, they call it renunciation, which sounds a bit depressing. What it means is you know yourself well enough now, you've dug deep inside, and this is the wisdom wing work, you're familiar with your attachment, you see your anxiety, you see your anger, you see your jealousy, you see all your old ridiculous habits, and instead of guilt, which is what we use, instead of beating yourself up, you really do have a little bit of kindness to yourself. Give it a break, Robina. You look at these old habits, you know you're sick of these old habits. You've got to have this kind conversation, not this constant guilt, which is beating ourselves up. It's got to really shift. That's real self-compassion, if you like. Really seeing that this is what's causing me harm and I am sick of it. So it's a very courageous attitude and it's accountable. It's grown up, not like the victim, poor me, it's not my fault. Do you understand? That absolutely is the wisdom wing. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Really good point. Yeah. Yeah. Someone else had their hand. Yes, sweetheart. Yes. Yes, yes.
Generate compassion on a deeper level. Obviously that's good practice. Other practices.
Sure, exactly, darling. I understand. So this is why it's so important to hear this point first, though. If, you know, okay, so lojong, we know this term in Tibetan. I don't speak Tibetan, but it means mind training. I mean, it sounds like the military a bit, but really, if you like, Buddhist practice really is mind training. I really mean that in the most sincere way. It's this serious involvement with your own conceptual stories and reconfiguring them and starting with yourself. That's when you really learn to become more courageous. And then on the basis of this, you are able to practice this more serious level of lojong, where you happily, the one of lojong is what you see problems and you welcome the problems as grist for your mill, to help you become even more strong and more compassionate and more beneficial to others. It's quite intense, right? So this is where the technique that everybody in the West loves this, and I'm always surprised because it's so advanced. It's called what do you call it? What's that term? Tonglen, yeah, Tonglen. Tibetan's very simple language, like these nice syllables, and you string them together to make words. It's very easy. And they're all just monosyllabic. Each syllable, I think, is a word. It's very amazing. Then you put them together 2 or 3 and you make new words. It's very easy. I don't speak it though. I tried for years and gave up. I didn't try. Never mind. Okay, so what's it called again? Tonglen. It means giving, taking. So this is this outrageous attitude, a more advanced on the compassion level, where you, for example, the sort of levels of compassion. The first level of compassion is, oh my God, look at that suffering. And you have empathy. That's compassion. Then the next level, great compassion, which you have to cultivate. What can I do to help? That's profound. The next one is, what? Tonglen, thank you. This is Tonglen. This one goes, you know what? Give it to me, I can handle it. So Tonglen, actually, I think we make mistakes in understanding what it is. One of the commonest misconceptions, I think, is that Tonglen is like a healing technique. So there you are, you've got your alcoholic brother. So you think, oh, I'll do Tonglen for him. No, Tonglen is a practice for you. It's one of your most intense trainings. And this is basically what you'd do. You'd visualize your brother, your alcoholic brother, let's say, and there's many ways of doing it. It's an attitude, but you can do it in terms of a formal meditation. So one approach would be you visualize like your self-centeredness, like a little rock at your heart. Then when you breathe, you're using your breath. So when you breathe out, you breathe in first, and you imagine breathing in their suffering. So what you're doing is you imagine you breathe it into you, which means you're taking it away from them and giving it to you, putting it onto you. So you're breathing in their suffering, wanting them to be free of it and thinking, I'm happy to have it. Give it to me, babe. I can handle it. So then you imagine breathing in this yucky smoke, this suffering, your beloved brother being free from suffering, and it kind of smashes your self-cherishing. Then when you breathe out, you imagine giving your brother your happiness, your health, whatever you have. You give with this delicious, blissful light, and you imagine him being happy. So the first one of taking, that's the practice of compassion. The second one of giving, that's the practice of love. So love is, may you be happy. Compassion is, may you not suffer. They're kind of fundamental. So Tonglen's amazing, and people love doing it, but it's very profound. It doesn't mean you're going to get a headache. It's another misconception. Oh, what if I get a headache? What if I get a... No, you're not going to get a headache, I promise. It's not a healing technique. There are plenty of healing techniques. I mean, do medicine Buddha. But this is a technique specifically for oneself to grow this courageous attitude that if you could, you would take their suffering upon yourself. That's pretty intense, people. Do you understand? I hear parents talk like that. That's about it. Parents about for their beloved children, I remember a friend of mine, this blew my mind, a friend of mine in prison, this Mexican dude, ex-gangster. He had, a lot of them have liver disease and sitting for years and years with no sunlight in these top security cells, 23 hours a day. Anyway, he wrote and he said that he got some possibility, some treatment. He said, perhaps, Robina, I should not have the treatment and get sick and then purify my karma, And then he said, and maybe I should also think about, when I think of my people coming into prison, these young Mexican kids, my people, that maybe I'd be happy. He said, I wish I could take upon myself their sentence and they could get out of prison. I mean, that's intense. You maybe think of it as for your beloved child, but who thinks of that when you see some smelly stranger? I mean, you can do this when you walk down the street. You see a homeless person, and you'd have to go over there and do it. If you could, you would, but you can't, so you would train yourself. You imagine going over there. You imagine giving them your house keys and your address. You imagine swapping clothes and you sitting down there, and they go and enjoy your house. That's Tonglen. That's pretty intense. It's a powerful training. It's not just fantasy. It's programming your mind. So Tonglen's a pretty amazing, a specific example of Lojong, For some reason, it's very popular in the West. It's very fascinating. But Lojong in general is a more advanced level of practice of using problems, of greeting problems. In the very first level of practice, when you're out of control and you shout and yell at everybody, you don't greet a problem, you avoid a problem. You control your body, you control your speech, and you control your mind because you're sick of suffering. That's the first level of practice. Once you've got a handle on that, you can now start to have compassion. And then when you're really courageous with your compassion, you can even greet a problem and see it as good. Why? Logically, because a problem is what attachment doesn't want. By greeting it, you put atomic bombs under attachment. How marvelous. It's a great attitude. It's a very powerful approach, you know. Because finally, it's based on emptiness, that nothing has an intrinsic nature. I was talking about this recently. I'm not trying to be a saint or anything, but I have ringing in the ears. A lot of people have ringing in the ears, right? Yeah, isn't it? Ringing in the ears. I know it's got a fancy Greek name. I don't want a Latin name, never mind that. So the point is, it gets worse, you know, as you get older, I've noticed. And of course, it's annoying. I mean, annoying is a polite word for anger. I don't get really that angry. But at some point these last couple of years, I've really realized I can't make it go. I tried all those methods. I read all those 49-minute videos. Nothing works. You know, these dumb looking pills they send you. It's a load of rubbish. I remember an acupuncturist friend of mine, he said, if somebody got that one, he said they'd win $1 million. Work out how to fix it with acupuncture, you know, or with whatever. It's a very subtle thing. Anyway, the point is this. I remember I went to one audiologist just to check on it and how bad it is, you know, whatever. And she had a little questionnaire, and one of the questions was, do you feel like you're kind of panicking and imprisoned by it? Absolutely, yes. You're lying there trying to go to sleep, and you're just dominated by this loud noise. It's like I get up sometimes, have to go and work and divert myself. So I realized I had to do something about it in my mind. So I decided I had two choices. I had two things to do. I'm not trying to be like a saint, but it's working, and it's an amazing thing. I decided I had to start calling it good. I'm quite serious. I had to start saying it was a nice sound and stop resisting it, because resistance is anger, aversion, and it just builds up. I had to call it a good sound. I had to accept it and welcome it. But the other thing was I had to decide then not to pay attention to it. Well, I'm telling you, it works. I can't believe it. Every now and again, I think, oh my God, it's going to get loud again. It's the same, but it's going to become a panic-stricken again. It doesn't. It just is in the back of my mind. It's there, but I don't pay attention. And it works. So this is just, you know, this is really a simple example. And this is really proving the Buddhist view about emptiness, that nothing has an intrinsic nature as good or bad. This is very shocking for us. When we are caught up in the attachment and caught up in the anger, everything appears absolute, doesn't it? Like, don't be ridiculous. Of course it has an intrinsic nature. That is bad. That is good. That's how ego is. So it really loosens the grip, you know. Like, you know, you come down to the kitchen and your hubby slurps his coffee again. I've read that one of the most infuriating sounds for people who practically want to make you kill people is these kinds of sounds, like slurping your coffee or snoring, you know. Very personal sounds. It's true, isn't it? It's something enraging about it, especially when it's your hubby or your sister or something. So that's a simple example. Because anger resists something. Anger is a panic attack that can't stand this thing. So to be able to slowly turn that around and not have a panic attack and see it for what it is and then learn to reinterpret it, wow. That's Lojong, babies, I tell you. That's advanced practice. And it's possible. We do it every day, but we don't call it that. Like your mum, you got to paint a new picture of your mum. Your infuriating, angry, neurotic, depressed, self-centered, narcissistic mum. Or anybody, put any word in there you like. We know what I mean. So we've built up that picture for 49 years. And so, of course, this is when you put yourself into it. You know yourself someone who can't stand you. You know they've got a very fixed picture of you, haven't they? They've painted you with one particular brush, and you know it's not fair. You know that they don't see the whole person. Same with your mum. This is Lojong, I tell you. It's profound. You've got to paint a new picture. there's a saying, if you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? That's the point here, you know. What if you can't? And we assume there is no choice. I've just got to be angry. That's why we go mad, I tell you. So my friends in prison are such good examples. Their backs are against the wall. They don't have the luxury of any choice except to work on their mind. We might as well be in prison. Oh, I hate my job. I'm telling you, you know, I talk to you. I hate my job. It's disgusting. The boss is evil. The colleagues are horrible. The pay is lousy. And you've been hearing me say this for 10 years. Well, you know, Robina, have you thought about changing your job? No, I can't do that. I'll never get another job. Not possible. Well, honey child, have you thought of changing your attitude towards your job? No, I can't do that. It's bad. He's evil. This is how we live our lives, like paralyzed. Too afraid to do a physical change and unable to do a mental change. No wonder we suffer, people. Any questions, Zoomers? Are we communicating?
Yes.
Good. Sure thing, where are you? Go, sweetheart, yes. Bit louder to the mic, darling. Sweetie pie, I really need you to talk a bit louder into the mic. But it's not on, darling. Oh, it doesn't work anyway. Oh, does it?
So you've spoken a lot about calmness. Maybe there's nothing more you'd like to say on it, but my understanding and familiarity with Buddhism is quite shallow. So this may be reflective of that. But what I've been struck by Buddhism is the kind of active nature.
Sorry, what, sweetheart?
The active nature
Of Tonglen.
No.
Oh.
Separately in Buddhism about how much of what happens and what happens to your mind is due to your own actions. That your actions are determinative of so many things. So it's really a sense that you said of accountability and ownership.
Yes.
But in Tonglen, at least in the example that you gave, that concept of accountability kind of fluidity, because it seems to be, you know, your actions are having no impact.
Okay, now I get your point. This perfect point. This is why that practice has got nothing to do with helping your alcoholic brother. It's a practice for you to train yourself to have the courageous compassion that enables you to open your heart. And if you could, you would take upon yourself. It's a way of you growing your own compassion. That's all it is. It's got nothing to do with helping your brother. It's a training. It's like you're visualizing playing tennis with Roger Federer every day. He doesn't get the benefit of your visualization. It's you training yourself to be a better tennis player. It's your personal practice. Can you hear that? That's not, you are, no, you are, darling, because you've done the wisdom wing where you know totally your own suffering and you know your own aversion and you know your own anxiety and you know your own attachment. You know deeply the suffering because you've looked at your own. That's why that's first level, junior school, entry level, grade 1. Put your hands in your own shit, honey child. Then you will have incredible compassion for other people. But we don't even touch our own suffering. Are we communicating? You sure? You shrugged like no.
It was an acknowledgement.
Okay. Okay. Of course you do, yes. But the thing is that this is new. This is not how we think of compassion and inner practice. But this is, so I remember Lama Zopa one time saying, because the first level of practice is knowing the intensity of our own suffering because of having attachment or aversion and jealousy and depression. We say those words loosely, but that's Buddha's word for these. He would love the term mental illness. These are the mental illnesses from the Buddhist perspective, his analysis. And these are what are breaking our hearts and making us crazy and harm each other and be depressed. And these are what cause our pain. As Lama Zopa says, when you've really done the inner work, and that's my term, once you've really he said, you've really got this self-compassion. He uses the term renunciation. When just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive. It is like being in a septic tank. So the level to which that the Buddhist view that we can get in touch with our own mental pain. This sounds so demented to us in our culture. It sounds so extreme. We would never think we are mentally ill. We think it's the people who go to the therapist and have to take all their pills. But the Buddha says we're all got these afflictions, these mental afflictions, mental illnesses, and this is what he means by this suffering, you know. So really knowing our own mind intimately is the first step. Then your compassion for others is just beyond tremendous. Are we communicating? Good. Yeah. Okay, darling, there's different terms, isn't it? You know, the stages of practice that they present in the path. First, you got the wisdom wing, which is all about, first level is controlling your body and speech, being a nice person, behaving nicely, control the servants of your mind, live in vows, don't kill, don't steal, don't jump on the wrong partner, etc., etc. That's the junior school. Then you harnessed your energy to some degree. Now you get to the next level of practice and you really become intimately familiar with your own mind and this attachment and aversion and all the dramas in here. This is the wisdom wing, right? And if you completed that, you'd realize emptiness and you'd get the hell out of samsara. But from this, mainly, you get this enormous awareness of your own self and the suffering of delusions and a wish to be free from them. And this brings you a lot of contentment and fulfillment and self-confidence. This is the method for you to become a marvelous person. This is the wisdom wing. You're with me so far. Now you've got the compassion wing, and the stages of development are, first you have to accomplish bodhicitta, which is the result of developing equanimity and all those other qualities and love and compassion and great compassion, doing Tonglen, and then it finally culminates in this outrageous paradigm shift in your mind where now only others are in your mind. This is already bodhicitta, and all part of all the Tonglen and the Lodrong are all part of the methods to getting bodhicitta. Now, once you got the bodhicitta and you become a bodhisattva, now you do life after life after life, you practice the 6 perfections. You perfect the first 4, generosity, morality, enthusiasm and patience and enthusiasm, bopping life after life in relation to others in your lives. And then you sit on your meditation cushion and get the last 2, which is concentration and emptiness. And you go life after life until you perfected these 6 and now you're a Buddha. That's the whole path. Okay. Okay. That's the path. A summary of the path. The path. Okay, I sound like a Mexican, no, not Mexican, what do you call it? Boston person. The only one thing they share with Australians, they say, ah. That's how we say, you know. Any questions?
Hi. I don't really have a question. Oh, wow, this really works. I don't really have a question, but more of a confusion.
Oh, darling, come on.
About the, not about the compassion for the harmers, but about the perspective that karma seems to create, or that the idea seems to create, that people who are suffering, who experience suffering, even the worst kinds of suffering, have brought this upon themselves through life after life. And it seems like that idea for thousands of years has led to so much harm: caste systems, slavery,
yes,
etc.
I understand. So what? So you have to. Can you put that as a question? Then we can discuss it. It's a good point. I get your point.
Yeah.
Please phrase it as a question. It's very helpful if you did that. Phrase it as a question.
So I guess the question is,
The question is, does the view of karma perpetuate slavery and blaming the victim?
I guess that's what it is.
That's your question, isn't
it?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking my question for me. I appreciate it. In addition to the lecture.
Okay, I think, okay.
Venerable Robina?
Or, to enable you to turn yourself around harvest and take person. Those vows are to enable you to harness your spirit world so that you can become more happy, more content. That's the purpose of that set of vows. It's no reason, it's just very strict, don't this and don't that. Why? Turn yourself into a happy person. The next level, well, some vows are more profound and more vast because they're don't this and don't that, but they're now directly related to doing action, to enable you to break down the barriers between yourself and other, and to enable you to be more compassionate, more empathetic, and more useful to others. That's what drives the Bodhisattva vow. So then, my feeling is when you, I mean, I always, I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm not going to say that I was thinking that you have to have the Bodhisattva vows first, but I've heard recently from somebody who hasn't decades, which is going into the Bodhisattva vows. I don't know. But typically, you do the Bodhisattva vows first. You take refuge, you take the layperson vows, get a practice going, and then you take the Bodhisattva vows. I mean, you can read it in quite advanced, they really apply to quite advanced spiritual practitioners, but they're available to us, and they're marvelous to have, and they would say that they last and life to life, they're marvelous to take from them. Yeah. So if you feel, yeah. Does that make sense, Rita?
Channels and its relationship with experience of suffering? Because you mentioned about that in the first talk.
It's from the Vajrayana point of view, from the Tantric point of view, the way they describe the universe is in terms of there is matter. The universe consists of matter, which is the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, and then minds. That's it. And so each individual mind, according to this system, is inextricably connected to their own set of the four elements. And so we have gross body and gross mind, which is the sensory consciousness. And then we have subtle mind, which is our mental states, and subtle body, which is these 72,000 subtle channels that course through our entire body. And then the wind energies go through all those, and then our states of mind are connected to those wind energies. Will that do for now? Sweetheart, will that do for now? Yes. Okay, good, I'm happy. Okay. So, yeah, so the mind and the body are intimately connected from this perspective. So that's why you go to your Tibetan doctor, or your Chinese doctor for that matter, they'll feel your pulses. And the pulses is the movement of those wind energies through your nervous system. And then your different winds are connected for your different states of mind. So if you've got lots of anxiety, your doctor will feel the imbalance of those particular winds, and she'll give you these herbs that calm down the winds that then will calm down your anxiety. It's like that. There's an intimate relationship between the subtle physical and your mental states. Do you understand? Good. Okay. What else, people?
Question?
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
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 Since I was probably 8 or 9, I used to wonder incessantly, and I still do, that how is it that I'm born, with such loving parents, with privilege?
Yes, yes.
And what determined me being in this body,
okay, good.
and not, in the opposite end of the spectrum.
Exactly.
And even though I have a basic understanding of what you just shared tonight, and have studied drama for a little bit, I still have difficulty reconciling, as a continuation of the gentleman that was asking about.
Which bit you reconcile?
Well, how is it, so the people who are subject to geopolitical, to natural disasters,
I understand. Okay,
how does that relate to?
I'll give you a brief summary of karma, shall I?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay. There are 4 ways that our past actions or karma ripen in the present. And there are therefore 4 ways that our present actions will ripen in the future. That's the principle, okay? That every millisecond of what you think and do and say, one is the fruit of having done them before, but two is also what will determine what you do now, which determines your future person and your future experiences. It's just this logical analysis, taking it as our hypothesis here. So the first way your karma ripens is the type of rebirth you get, the type of body, animal body, human body, fish body, mosquito body, whatever. First one. So in your case, you've got a human body. Okay, so that's the fruit. The Buddha would say, if among all the bodies that are available, like ant body, dog body, spirit body, hell being body, there are many types of physical experiences. A human one is the best of a bad lot, right? A human one. It's the fruit of a particular virtuous action of non-killing, ripening at the time of your past death, being specific, not more than 7 weeks before your mind found its way in your mummy's fallopian tube. It's no accident. It's one of the past virtuous actions of your own that was triggered from your creating the virtue of non-killing, that was triggered at the time of your past death, that programmed you specifically to go to that particular mummy and that particular daddy. First one is your body. Second is all the tendencies and states of mind within that body. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you look into your mind, you might recognize you've got some delusions. Perhaps you've got like anger occasionally, jealous, depression, join the universe. They're called deluded states of mind. But you'll also see you've got good tendencies and kindness and ethics and morality and wish to be generous, right? You've got some of those too. How marvelous. Every one of those tendencies, or being good at football or music, every one of those tendencies did not come from your mummy and daddy. Not one fraction of them came from your mummy and daddy. They are habits that you brought with you from having done them before, like duh, you know. That's the second way your karma ripens, habits. Third, it's called experiences similar to the cause. See, we can see we're very social creatures, aren't we? You have to have a mummy to get born. She needed the daddy's egg or sperm, whatever it was. You have sisters and siblings and rats and roaches and aunties and uncles and next door neighbors and etc. throughout your life until now. If you look at it simply, you could put them into two categories. All those beings. One, there's those that have been nice to you, kind to you, loving to you, generous to you, and they can change roles. And the other lot are the ones who are mean to you and nasty to you and bad things happen. You agree with that? So every one of those experiences, without exception, is the fruit of your past actions. If people are kind to you, it's because you've been kind to them. Karma is very personal. It's a natural law that runs the universe, Buddha says, right? It's a natural law that runs the universe. It's a natural law within which the universe runs. So then in other words, whatever way that beings treat you is the fruit of your past actions, and it's personal. So if you're being born where you get lied to, guess what? You've lied to them. If people don't believe your words, even if you're telling the truth, that's the experience from the cause of having lied at some point. Every tiny thing that people see about you and do to you and think of you is the fruit of your karma. It's a very interdependent scenario. There can't be a thing that would happen to you that you didn't create. So the fourth is called environmental karma, the very physical world itself, the way it impacts upon you. So give one example. The first example of killing would non-killing would cause you to get, let's say, a human body. You got one of them. Second, a tendency to not kill in your mind. That's the second result of the habit of not killing. But you could equally have the habit to kill. Look at the human race. Most humans kill something. So you can get human life on the basis of the first track of karma, which is not killing, but you can have a tendency to kill from another bunch of lifetimes. Do you understand what I'm saying? Third, if the result of not killing as an experience would be that you will not die young and you won't get killed. Well, so far, so good, huh? That karma's still got petrol in the tank. The fourth one of not killing is you don't get sick, you're happy, you can eat garbage and be all happy and jolly and you won't get too sick, and the physical world impacts upon you nicely. Are we communicating? Now there's nothing left. There's the environment, how it impacts upon you, people, how things happen, natural disasters, whatever you want to call it, that's all environmental karma. COVID's environmental karma. Earthquakes is environmental karma. Storms is environmental karma. I've got a little spot where I live in Manhattan that you'd think it was in the country. I never get any traffic 7 days a week. in the West Village. That's due to much be some virtue of mine to have a peaceful environment with trees out both sides and birds singing at me. Do you understand? And around the corner it's chaos and stinky. I'm not trying to show off, I'm just saying, aren't I fortunate? So every millisecond of the way environment impacts upon you, the fruit of your past actions. Every millisecond of what happens, good or bad, keep remembering the good or the bad, that people see you and hear you and treat you, karma. Everything inside your mind, karma. The kind of body you have, karma. We are the creators of this universe.
Question is that how can I see those who are suffering, be it at a subconscious level?
What, darling? Sorry, what?
I said, how can I see those people who are suffering, like for
You mean
example
like
in the
being
Ukraine, for
harmed and
example,
abused and raped and murdered?
and saying, or for example in Ukraine, these people are suffering because of war. How can I not see them from a perspective, well, they deserve it?
That's my whole point, because that's the view that we use now that assumes that if you're suffering, and if you did it before, we assume, therefore, this heavy duty deserve. That's a revolting view. If you do it properly and stop having guilt every time, because that's what happens if you use karma wrongly. I must have been a bad person. I hate myself. This is disgusting. You don't say that when the doctor says you're going to get cancer. You cry with compassion for yourself and you vow to stop smoking. But we have this vindictive, heavy duty, self-loathing, guilty, neurotic view of I and dump it on others. No wonder we are all mad. It's a revolting view that we've made up. We've overlaid this philosophical view with guilt, blame, deserve. It's so heavy. What I said to him, I can't repeat it all. It would only bring compassion. First for yourself. Like when you see you're going to get cancer. You don't say, oh, I'm a bad person, I deserve cancer. Nobody says that. You're going to have compassion for yourself and know you don't want cancer, so you give up the cause. It's a simple attitude and it's self-respectful. But we're so used to punishment and reward view. It's dualistic, it's schizophrenic. It's a conspiracy theory. Are we communicating? Are we communicating a little bit, sweetheart?
Thank you.
Karma is the one that we absolutely get wrong in our culture. When we get it right, in my opinion, I think karma for me is one of the most favorite Buddhist teachings. It's been the revelation for me in my life. It's the source of self-respect, it's the source of accountability, it's the source about growing up, and it's the source of compassion. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody doesn't know that they're causing their own happiness and suffering. Everybody thinks it's out there somewhere. Schizophrenic. Are we communicating a little bit?
Yes.
Sweetie pie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Yes. Give the man the mic, please. Is there anybody on Zoom who wants to talk? Sweetheart, anybody here has questions? No. On the chat? There has to be some. Look in the chat box, please. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
How many are there in the chat?
Right now, there's 0 in the chat, so it's
Yeah.
way.
Let me see if we can find it. Go on, yes.
Thank you, Venerable, for your
Good
teaching.
job. Good.
3 questions. Sorry. The first, I know you discussed this before, but it feels relevant to this conversation about karma. Could you briefly mention why taking vows are a virtuous karmic action, and why taking a vow is a good karmic action?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good question. So again, these words, we have a problem with the words. You know, vow sounds like someone sitting on top of you and forcing you to do something, otherwise you get punished. That's how we think about it, right?
Yeah.
But you know, if you drive a car, if you had to write down everything you have vowed not to do, you'd have a list of 100 things. And why do you do that? Because you want to learn to be a proper driver. So it's a way of framing how to become a better driver in terms of what not to do. Don't put your foot on the accelerator at the same time as the brake, mate. Don't put your left turn out if you're going to go right. You're in trouble. You learn the rules and you're happy to learn them because you want to be a better driver. Well, vows are helping you become a better human being, more happy and fulfilled and harnessed and controlled and developed. They're marvelous instructions of how to hone your body, speech, and mind to transform you into a happy, fulfilled human being. That's the first general answer. So then secondly, there's an intentional thing about vows, isn't there? In other words, when we all know when you decide, I will not say bad words to my sister tomorrow for 24 hours, you promise yourself, guess what? You will keep it. We all know when you decide to do something, that makes you do it. Hardly rocket science. As the Tibetans put it, everything exists on the tip of the wish. So vowing not to kill, steal, lie, harm, badmouth, eat too much, this and that, you make your own. It programs your mind to become a better person, which is what you want. Are we communicating? In general, that's vows. So as Lama Zopa says, Buddha, this is now from the Buddha's teachings, and Lama Zopa goes on about it, Buddha loves his vows. They talk about how vows are like this powerful, this sounds a bit cosmic, subtle physical energy that's visible to clairvoyance. Buddha loves his vows. So when you take vows as a Buddhist, you become a Buddhist. You sit in front of that person and you repeat after them, you know, I will never, from now until the time of I die, I will never kill, I will never lie. And you say it that day, and you've just received it from that person. Where did that person get it from? Their teacher. Where'd they get it? Their teacher. Where'd they get it? You track it back in this unbroken chain of energy back to Lord Buddha himself. So you plug into this power source, and then every day that drives you, you remember, I will never kill. It's there like on your, like that Pinocchio or somebody. Who was it on the shoulder?
Jiminy Cricket.
Thank you, that one. It's like that. It guides your mind. And the point is the way Lama's put, and this is now how karma works now. So I've got to go into details, okay? This is logical. Okay. At this moment in time in this room, most of us are not actually killing anything. Would you agree with that? Unless you're sitting on some little mouse or something, you know? Do you understand? So that's great. You're not killing. So you go tick the box, I'm not killing. I must be a good person. Yeah, you are. Lucky mouse that you're not killing them. But honey, your mind's not involved in it, is it? At this moment in time, your mind is not saying, I must not kill. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So karma, the way karma works is, it's the main driver of karma is the mind, intention. So you can have a mouse in your kitchen. There's 4 things in place in order for any action we do to produce like the fully ripened result of a type of body. So in terms of non-killing, in order for that action to be a conscious, in order to be a delicious, rich, karmic seed of non-killing, there have to be 4 things in place. This is without vows. 1, there has to be a mouse up there. I'll say a mouse. 2, there has to be intention, I will not kill. And then there has to be a motivation, which is compassion. That's the second part, the mind involved in doing it. That's the crucial piece. There's got to be the thought, I will not kill that mouse. You with me so far? 3, you must do the action of saving the mouse. And 4, release the mouse, and now it's a happy mouse. That's the 4 things that have to be in place in order for that one action of yours of called non-killing to drop into this nice bank vault of delicious non-killing karmic seeds, such that at the time of your death, one of those will be triggered, which will give you another nice human body. First point. Now, you can have a mouse in your kitchen, but you don't see it. So there's no intention, I will not kill it, right? Or even killing, you have no intention to kill. Second, there's no motivation of anger. I must kill the mouse, how dare the mouse be in my kitchen. Your mind doesn't, you don't see it with your eyes, so there's no intention and there's no motivation. 3, your foot goes on the mouse. 4, dead mouse. You create 0 negative karma, virtually. It's the same with virtuous karma. You know, there's a homeless person. You're walking down the street. 1, the object, a homeless person. 2, intention to give $20. No, there's no intention. 2B is motivation, compassion. No, there's no motivation because there's no intention. 3, $20 falls out of your pocket. 4, the homeless person gets $20. They're happy. 0 karma of generosity for you because your mind isn't involved. Are we communicating?
Yes.
So now at this moment in time, you're not killing anything. So your mind is, but your mind is not involved in not killing. So it's only when you have an intention not to kill and plus a motivation of compassion that you leave any karmic imprint at all of not killing in your mind, which is the cause of getting even just a reasonable human life, not to mention having a tendency to not kill, not to mention being not killed, not to mention having a nice environmental result. The world is created by minds. So if there's no intention to not kill, you don't get any results of not killing. You're just going to get the results of the other ones. So by having a vow not to kill, Lama Zopa says, Buddha's teaching, 24 hours a day, you've got this powerful intention in your mind to live your life, you define yourself as a non-killer 24 hours a day, that you've got that vow to not kill, even without ever thinking about it. Because of the power of vows, you're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds 24 hours a day of non-killing karma and putting atomic bombs under killing karma. It's the way to get ahead of the game, by living in vows.
Thank you.
Are we communicating?
Yes. Second question is, when Master Shantideva said all the happiness in the world comes from thinking of others and all the suffering comes from when we think of ourselves.
Right.
Can you just elaborate on that or explain why that's true?
Well, this is the more advanced teachings in the compassion wing. And this is where, if you're going to think of, you see, there's both the teachings of compassion and the teachings of emptiness in that. So when you're a bodhisattva who no longer has the thought of I, and second, you've realized emptiness, so you're an Arya bodhisattva, you no longer have a thought of an I, and you no longer cling to an I. So then this is the quickest way to become a Buddha. It's the quickest way to be infinitely kind and loving and compassionate and wise and beneficial, and there cannot be possibly 1 millimeter of suffering for you. And if you have I, the grasping at I, and then the putting I get happy and I attachment and I anger and I jealousy and I depression, this is the source of suffering. And then you do things to harm others. What do you think?
Yeah, seems.
Does that answer your question? Or is it
Yeah, it checks out for me.
I mean, this is heavy duty path. This is kind of advanced, you know. Because the assumptions in our culture, the assumption of our culture, the assumptions of our neuroscience, the assumptions of our psychology is an I, a very powerful, self-existent real I. It's the assumption. So it's quite a hard one to hear. And it's not meant to be making ourselves hate ourselves. It's kind of like revolutionary view of the universe, you know.
Before we leave, would you consider leading us in a Tonglen meditation?
No.
Please?
No. You do it yourself. Anybody on here? No, thank you, darling.
Thank you so much.
Who's here? Yeah. Can they say a little bit more, please? Have they said more? Have you summarized? That's all they said. Sweetie pie, whoever you are, can you say a tiny bit more for me? And then I'll ask you, please write a bit more or speak to me. Then we can discuss it. If you'd like to speak to me, there it is. Who is it? It's Mary. Come on, Mary, talk to me. Mary, talk to me, darling.
I'm here. I'm here.
Was it you who asked the question?
In the chat.
Mary,
Yes.
was it you who asked the question?
I asked a question in chat.
Oh, but not that question. Okay,
Oh,
hang on.
sorry.
Who asked that question, please?
Stephanie.
Stephanie, you want to talk to me, darling? Talk to me, Stephanie. No? I'm having a panic attack. No? Where is she? Where's Stephanie?
Okay, I just was able to unmute myself.
Say a little bit more.
Yes. So I notice at times I will approach a situation or someone with the intent to be open-minded and open-hearted. And a response can then trigger something in me that sends me somewhere else that overrides the intent.
You mean they're mean to you? You mean they're mean to you in response, Stephanie? Is that what you're indicating?
Yeah, or I take it that way, and then I'm whatever, combative or defensive or
Okay,
hurt or.
Okay, using the Buddhist analysis, sweetheart, what do you think it is in you at that moment that arose when, say, he showed impatience? What would be the delusion in your mind? Do you understand that? What do you think it would be in you that caused you to defend yourself? What do you think it is, darling?
Maybe, I don't know, is the delusion that I have an expectation of kindness?
Expectation, exactly. Expectation is a function of attachment, and this particular attachment is the neediness to be seen as a nice person, the neediness to be heard, the neediness to be seen, and then suddenly they go against that, and it's like a knife in the heart, isn't it? So, darling, we have this join the universe. We all are little hungry little girls and boys who are dying to be loved, and the tiniest indication that maybe we didn't get it is very sad for us. That's the suffering, darling. This is called samsara. So what do you think you do with it?
Yes. Yes, thank you. That's it.
I mean, this is, we can be 97 and we're still the same, aren't we? We're so fragile.
Yes.
Our main attachment, more than for sex and drugs and rock and roll, babe, I promise you. So being open is compassion. Never lose that. But that means also got to be brave and not have the attachment and the neediness and the expectation. And it's very, very, very hard to identify it, Stephanie, because it's so deeply ingrained. And our trouble is when we're open, because we haven't practiced enough, our attachment is there. So then we think, well, I've got to close myself to people. We give up, when we try to give up the attachment, we end up also giving up the compassion. So it's a very tricky balance to get, and it can only come from practice and much self-awareness. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it time to go home yet? What's the time?
Time is 8:05.
8:07. It's time to go home. One hook. Any more burn? Hang on a second. Just a second, you sweetheart. Wait. In a minute. At the back there. Go.
Oh, I'm over to your right, but I have the.
Oh, are you? Where are you?
I'm sorry.
Oh, look at you. There you go. Okay.
I had a further question about karma and the way we kind of become repulsed by the idea of suffering people deserving it.
Okay.
When we talk about past actions, like in a previous incarnation, how do we square that with the view of no self?
I understand. Sure. It's easy. I mean, not easy, but the theory is easy. That there is a self. The way to put it very simply, the Buddha's saying that there's a conventional reality of things and there's the ultimate reality of things. And so from the conventional point of view, we know that's called a mug, and that's called a computer, and that's a chocolate bar, and you're a person. Do you agree with that? Unless you're tricking us, you're a person. That's the label. So the word self, the word I, and the word person are all used synonymously in Buddhist philosophy. So you are called a self. You are called a person. So now Buddha then goes along and tells us that there is no self. But we've got to kind of expand it. What he's saying is that ultimately there is no self from its own side. But honey child, conventionally, there is a self that does exist in dependence upon causes, etc., etc., etc. So it's the bringing together of these two initially seemingly contradictory concepts to see that they're not contradictory. So as Lama Zopa puts it, when you really realized emptiness, no self, it's as if there is no self. But there is a self. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. So it's a really tasty coming together of the two truths. And this is what takes time. Are we communicating? So there is conventionally a self that creates karma and is happy and is sad. Ultimately, there is no intrinsic self that causes intrinsic happiness and causes intrinsic suffering. There's no intrinsic karma because everything is empty.
So then, if let's say, in this life, I'm a queer person, so I could say to a certain degree, I'm suffering at the hands of confused people. And perhaps in a previous incarnation, I was Boss Tweed rounding up the transgendered people or whatever. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, in a simple way, without putting the labels on it, whether it's black or white or pink or transgender, if you're being harmed by others and not accepted by others, you could argue that's a fruit of arrogance. If you put people down, and it's very easy for us to do. So don't even look at the labels, because one life it's called gay, next life it's called having 3 legs or something, or you wait for it, we'll see. So don't get too caught up in the label. But some people, we all know, some people have been gay since they're born, but have never suffered from it. We all know that because some people just have the karma not to be harmed too much. Other people can be the smallest thing and can be agonized all their life. We're not being mean. This is how it is. So perception, how people perceive us, is the third kind of karma, experiences similar to the cause. So you might, so if you're treated with respect all the time, whether you're gay or pink, is not the issue. It's that you've got humility karma from the past that people respect you. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. I guess what I'm asking is, like in Hinduism, there's this belief that there's an Atman or some like
I know,
essential.
exactly. No view like, that's where Buddha diverged from the Hindus. He went
Yes.
even beyond that view.
So then what is a personal karma, like this gentleman who's born into a loving family and good teeth and a happy life?
What's the question?
The question is, when we talk about his past actions resulting in in this present life, what the past actions of what?
Okay, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What's your name? The nice person with a good life. What's your name, babe?
PJ.
PJ, who are you? Kevin. Okay, so we have a label PJ on the basis of this set of body and mind over here, and then the label Kevin on the basis of this body and mind over here. Conventionally, they do exist, but don't get too grasping at them. But ultimately, they don't have an intrinsic nature, so they don't contradict. So there is conventional karma, conventional actions, a conventional virtue that is ripened in conventional PJ, having conventional nice mummy and conventional nice daddy, and nice people saying nice things about him. And then there's maybe ugly old Kevin, who's mean and arrogant and gets everybody going sticking their tongues out of him because he was a mean guy in the past. There's conventional reality, then there's ultimate, and they don't contradict is the big question you're asking. We hear empty as chucking out the baby with the bathwater. That's nihilism. Emptiness doesn't deny convention reality, and conventional reality is not set in stone. It's these two truths together. That's the skill to learn. Are we communicating, sweetheart? Good. Okay, one or two and then we go home, okay? Or wherever you want to go. Yes, go, sweetheart.
Coming back to karma,
Okay, oh my God, tonight's karma. How will you help it?
So you see, not just looking at karma of other people, but just looking at your own karma. Of course, all of us have got like fabulous causes and conditions, and we're sitting here, in this fantastic environment and listening to the words of the Dharma. But we also suffer. We go through a lot of causes and conditions which make us,
That's right.
They debilitate us, they cripple us.
That's right, exactly.
Many scenarios. So Jigme Lingpa, I read this wonderful text, and he turned around and said that, the body is inanimate and the mind is emptiness. So from that view, he said, suffering is really blessings. They're coming out as blessings. And, you're clearing your debts.
Good.
You're getting rid of all of these.
That's the Lodrong one in Tibetan. This term Lodrong. The more advanced level, when you understand this and you can use it as grist for your mill, for your path, then you can whiz to enlightenment.
Yeah. So that's my question. So how does one actually see now? If I'm sitting out here with this fabulous relationship or whatever, and I have a heartache because my partner dies or leaves or goes away, or my company, just completely.
Or the what?
I said that, I could be sitting in a really fantastic situation because of my karma, right? But if that situation was to disappear,
that's right.
Was to go away.
Yes.
Now, how do I look at that pain or that emotion as a blessing?
That's the point, sweetheart.
These are like clearing of debts.
Okay, the reason why it's a blessing is like if you're Lance Armstrong, I know he's a naughty boy now, but I always admired his intensity. He was like a fanatic. And for him, think of the example. For Lance Armstrong, he wanted to be the best damned cyclist in the universe. So every inch of going uphill, he was so happy. It would destroy most people. He didn't want to go downhill. And why did he wanted to push to the limit, beyond his limits, to become even more brilliant cyclist? Well, you want to become an even more brilliant, happy, wise, compassionate person. So every shitty thing that happens, everybody who rejects you, every bit of anger, every bit of meanness is grist for your mill, and you grab it and eat it up for fucking breakfast and become a better, more wise person as a result.
Second question. You gave this phenomenal clarity on the practice and the way forward and this, that, and the other, right? Now, how does one inculcate exactly that path while having a renunciation mind?
What? Sorry, I've lost you.
I said, you gave this phenomenal clarity on having, the practice, how, the ways and means of, compassion, generating compassion.
Yes.
So on and so forth. Just the practice in general, inculcating emptiness, inculcating, say, impermanence, acknowledging it, all emotions of pain, interdependence, all of this, right?
Yeah.
How does one actually internalize this while having a renunciation mind?
But honey child, renunciation is the prerequisite.
Yes, but my question here is that how does one move forward without having an aim? So you move forward.
Who says you haven't got a name? You just chucked the baby out with the bathwater. Renunciation, Petal, is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You're giving up attachment. You're giving up suffering. You're giving up garbage in yourself because you want to be free and liberated and brilliant and happy and wise.
Yes, but many times I give up all of these things thinking that
Because
there
you
is somewhere
chucked
to
the
go.
baby out with the bathwater. You've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Don't you understand that phrase?
Oh, yes, I do.
You've become nihilistic. You're thinking, so what happens is when you give up attachment, we also give up love. That is the worst thing. When you've given up attachment, you should have more love, more joy, more self-respect, not less. So it's a mistaken conception you have in your little mind, sweetheart.
I'm talking about having a renunciation to everything.
I am too. We have different definitions, obviously. Renunciation isn't renouncing cake or people. Renunciation is renouncing attachment and anger and jealousy and depression and low self-esteem and future suffering. It's what brings your joy.
But even the joy, isn't that somewhere you're going? Isn't that?
Of course, who says you shouldn't go anywhere? You're going to enlightenment, sweetheart. Don't be nihilistic. Your relative reality is there is a future and you're moving towards the future. Being attached to the future is neurotic. Moving towards it with compassion is valid.
No, but that's exactly where I'm at. The relative reality.
Well, then it's good. Keep moving then.
Yes, but having a renunciation mind. How does one inculcate that? That's my question.
I know that, and I've answered, and we don't.
It's like me looking at it's like me looking at the reflection of the moon on the lake,
No,
but
you're
knowing
too,
that it doesn't exist,
darling, you're being
and still
too,
enjoying
no,
it.
Sweetheart, you're being too cosmic about it. Come down to earth, sweetheart. Renunciation. Okay, tell me your definition.
Well, basically, me going and practicing and doing everything that I have, all my propensities, my motivation, my aspiration.
To what?
To benefit others and myself.
No, that's
right?
not renunciation. That's compassion.
No, of course.
I'm asking you your definition of renunciation.
So while doing that.
No, I need your definition of renunciation.
My definition is very simple: having no objective.
Total fucking insane and a mistake. May I please forgive my rudeness. You have got the wrong, you've got your definition, not Buddha's, darling. If you want yours, I can't argue with you. But if you want Buddha's, you've got the wrong end of the stick.
No, I want yours and Buddha's.
Okay, darling, well, it means you can have your cake and eat it too. We'll leave it there. I've got to go. I'm running out of voice.
Okay.
Carol, we have to wait till, Carol, we have to wait till next time, darling. I'm done. I'm cooked. I'm finished, all right? I'll sing a little prayer. May compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Jang choib sem cho grin poche ma kye panam ke gyuchig kye panyam pa be payang gong ne gong du ava sho. Thank you, everybody, really. I think I'm not coming back until December, am I? What happened? Well, I'm not, I think I'm back in December or something. November, is it? August, September. Yeah, I've got to go away for a couple of months. I'll be back in September and I'll see you then. November. What?